minute to. Okay, so today is February 15th, 2022. It is 7:09. And I just want to let the public, as they're coming into this meeting, understand that we're running a little bit late as there is a joint Board of Ed and Common Council meeting on the budget. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to let the meeting start because we're going to want people to join us, and we're still waiting on one or two of our council people to join us coming in from the other meeting.
Lisa, just to let you know, I just got an email from somebody who has sent an email in for testimony and also said they want to speak at the meeting. And they said that they exited, they tried to come in, they said it was starting soon, and then they're trying to get back in, just so you know.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give it a minute or two. I hope everybody's can indulge us for this. And I apologize. The other meeting had to happen tonight, and we are running just a little bit late. And I'll write Nora and Josh right now, just to make sure that they're coming in too.
Yes, Nora said she's on her way.
Okay, good. So I won't write Nora. I'll just check in with Josh. Great. Yeah, so once we get Nora and Josh, I'll just give it another minute and then I'll take the roll call. Mr. Keegan, your fire needs a little attending. I don't see it.
It only lasts for one meeting a night.
I thought I saw him adding a log.
I did. Let's see what happens.
I should mention to the public, well, as people are joining, yep, we're at 23 participants. To the extent that we have one or two Common Council members who are coming late because they're joining us from the Board of Ed joint meeting with the Common Council, they did commit to listen to the comments, the public comments to both of our matters this evening.
Lisa, just so you know, Margaret, who indicated to me in an email that she couldn't get in, appears that she is in, and it looks like Dan Lauricella, who also mentioned that she was having some issues, is now on as well.
Okay, good. All righty, I'm going to give it one more minute if people will indulge me for our other two members, and then I'll get the public comments started. I'll take the roll call and do our public hearings.
Just so you know, Tom, in a few minutes, I may have to call the fire department. It's going to be roaring.
We'll see it from here. We'll make that call for you in case you're busy handling the fire. All right, well, we've made the public wait 12 minutes, so I'm going to start this meeting. It's now 7:12, and I will take attendance, and then we will note when our other two committee members join us. So I see Mr. Hoovelman, I see Ms. Johnson, Mr. Keegan is here, Mr. Livingston is here, and I, Lisa Shanahan, the chair, are here. So I will open the public hearing now. We have two matters for to be discussed today on the public hearing. We have, we're going to discuss and vote on the temporary prohibition of cannabis establishments. And then the second public hearing we're going to have is to discuss and vote on Chapter 45, Article 4, which is outdoor dining standards and guidelines. We're not voting on the standards and guidelines. We're only voting on the outdoor dining, just to clarify what's written in the agenda. So, oh gosh, people are even calling here. So if you want to start the public comments, that would be great, Brian, if you want to handle that part of it, or whoever can see who might be raising their hands. I'm not sure who's handling our meeting tonight.
It's Anthony. We do
Hi,
have.
Thank you so much. If you could.
No problem.
And,
We do have.
Nora and Josh are here.
I was going to note that Nora and Josh just joined for purposes of our stenographer. Great. So if you handle that for us, Anthony, as far as people making public comment, that would be great.
Yes, we do have Ginger Cats with their hands raised. So I'm going to go ahead and give them the floor. And you have the floor.
Okay. My name is Ginger Katz, and I'm a local resident and founder of the Courage to Speak Foundation, a nonprofit organization located in Norwalk, Connecticut. that has been providing drug prevention programs for youth, young adults, and parents for over the last 25 years. Our mission is to empower youth to be drug-free. In addition, I serve on the Norwalk Prevention Coalition as a core member of the leadership team. I'm in support of the moratorium on the retail sales of cannabis in Norwalk. The delay will allow the city to conduct more research to put effective protocols into place concerning where and how cannabis will be sold in Norwalk. This will allow planning for traffic, parking, and other considerations that should be taken into account, since Norwalk will likely see the increase of shoppers from other communities like Westport and Weston, which will have permanently banned cannabis sales. Most importantly, it is critical that we allow our community leaders more time to plan for the ramifications of introducing easy access to cannabis in our community, which research shows will provide easier access to cannabis by youth. Allowing this to happen will be detrimental to our youth and subsequently our community. I have had a personal experience with how the introduction of marijuana led to a death of a child. My own son, Ian James Zaccarino, a Norwalk High School graduate. At the age of 13, Ian started using marijuana. He often came home to me in high school and said, "Mom, I can't concentrate." In Ian's junior year of college, he called up begging for help, crying, "Addicted to heroin. I can't stop. Please come and help me." Only a few months later, Ian died of a drug overdose. When I found him, my cries for help were heard 2 blocks away. Ian was only 20 years old. I believe marijuana was the drug that led my son to the drugs that killed him. To devise an effective plan, we need more time to develop zoning plans and educational campaigns that will keep our children safe. I'm certain that the cannabis sales begin. I'm certain that once cannabis sales begin in Norwalk, we will increase the number of children who will get addicted, just like in Colorado, where teens requiring drug treatment have increased. Within 4 years of the state legalizing it, marijuana use by Colorado teens increased by 65%. Please allow more time to ensure that our youth will be safe in Norwalk, where access to cannabis is sure to rise. We owe it to our children. Thank you, Ginger Katz, founder of the Courage to Speak Foundation in Norwalk, Connecticut.
Ginger,
Ms.
you,
Katz, thank you very, very much for your comments, and they were very heartfelt and very difficult to share, and we appreciate the courage it took for you to share them with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ginger, do you also sent in an email with an attachment? Do you want me to read that, or you just want me to attach it to the minutes?
It's very long. Do you mind?
I don't mind reading it if you want us to hear it, and then it'll be attached to the
Yes,
minutes.
please.
Okay,
Yes,
I'll read
please.
it. I'll read it after everyone else speaks.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have a Denise Rollison. You have the floor.
Denise, take yourself off mute.
Unmute her, because Denise appears to still be muted.
There you go.
Okay, I apologize.
No worries.
Good evening. My name is Denise Rollinson, and I'm a Norwalk resident and also a mental health and substance abuse treatment clinician. I'm requesting support for the moratorium on cannabis sales. The temporary ban will allow for more research as well as chance for greater public outreach and also awareness as to where and how Norwalk wants cannabis establishments in our city. As Norwalk is easily accessible by neighboring towns that have already banned or postponed cannabis sales, and we are on the I-95 corridor, making us part of the federal high-intensity drug trafficking area, along with other states. It is likely that Norwalk will become a cannabis market, not just for Norwalk residents, but also for neighboring towns. It is possible that we could be overwhelmed with traffic density and also the influx of DUIs or driving under the influence, which could put our community's health and safety at risk. Given more time for research and planning can better allow our city to determine what needs we have to deter crime and where the establishments could be located. This is important as these stores will be selling a substance that has a history as a DEA regulated Schedule I drug, meaning that it is highly addictive and there is inadequate research evidence to prove medical benefit. Cannabis places people under an influence, which has been shown to affect judgment and response time, especially in driving. Surrounding towns like Westport and Westport and Weston have already prohibited cannabis sales, and a third, Wilton, has a moratorium on sales, increasing the likelihood that their residents will be coming to Norwalk for cannabis, especially since they're in the surrounding areas. The moratorium could be used to explore the potential impact on traffic and crime, and also identify what security measures can be put in place, as well as basic traffic issue resolution. The moratorium would give Norwalk time to watch what happens in other places so that things could be put in place to create a community of health and safety as this substance is sold. Marijuana has greatly increased in potency from the past, and today there are new means and routes of administration. The moratorium would provide time for the city to study usage risks, public's awareness, and also signage and labeling so that Norwalk consumers may make more informed choices as to safety and can better educate their children about these risks. Also, it would allow the city to track issues in other local communities where sales start, to plan for the increase in emergency room visits and allow for any legislative amendments to the cannabis law during the current legislative session. I and others have advocated for amendments to inform the public of health and safety issues by adding warning labels to packaging like we have on cigarette packs and alcohol containers, as well as for education about the risks of today's very strong products, such as the dab pens that have put some local high school students in the emergency rooms after passing out. This is a new law that creates an entirely new market for a drug, and particularly one that is also dangerous to our youth. Taking time will have several benefits, not to mention subsequent treatment, preparing for subsequent treatment needs in a community with already limited taxed resources, both in mental health and in physical health. We have basically one hospital, and I believe that Danbury will be having most of mental health cases. More time would allow the city to identify the safest ways to introduce it into our community in a more safe way, if it needs to be introduced. It will allow time for the legislative session, which has just started, in case of any new legal amendments that may be forthcoming. And more importantly, it will allow Norwalk to observe what happens in other local communities so that when it's placed in Connecticut after sales, to put more supports in place to protect our community and families and children and our quality of life. A lot of times people do start using marijuana and then they do graduate to other substances, as well as they also mix marijuana with other substances. And that's also been happening on the street. I suggest that the moratorium start not within 10 days of the committee's vote, but on the first day of retail sales in order to give the city as much time as necessary so that we can really examine and prepare the community in terms of safety. We do know that mental health, it can exacerbate diagnoses and can also cause psychosis and things like that. All right, so I want to thank the committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak, and also as a Norwalk resident, as we continue to kind of care for the best interest of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rollison.
Denise, you also submitted a statement. It seems like it was very similar to what you said here. Do you just want me to attach it to the back of the minutes?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anthony, we can hear from our next participant.
Hello?
It appears to be Mr., I don't have the full name. I just have Anthony with your hand raised up, and it looks as though you're unmuted, so you may speak, sir. Thank you.
Anthony DeLauro. I'm a resident of Pine Hill Avenue Extension, as well as the Executive Director at the Human Services Council here in Norwalk, Connecticut. I don't want to repeat and take up everybody's time with the stuff that's said and may be said, but I do think that, first of all, I want to say thank you for letting me speak and hearing this. I do support and hope that we'll do a 9-month moratorium at the very least and delay cannabis sales. I think it's important to understand that what's already been said is many of the towns are surrounding us have already done it. And we already know that where there's more access, in places like Colorado, they've done studies and show that when there's more access, over 30% increase in usage will go up. I think it is, it's not good for our communities where there's more commercial property and people of at-risk communities or minority communities to have access in their communities. I think that should be planned out so that this is a equitable situation around Connecticut and not just in Bridgeport, Norwalk, and Stamford. So I think it's we should take the time to plan to protect our citizens if we believe that usage will go up when we allow retailers to sell this to our communities. So I think it's important to have the time to understand how do we prevent this getting in the hands of kids. We deal with this every day with alcohol. There are retailers who sell to minors, and I'm assuming we will probably have the same problem when retailers start here as well. So we do need to have some time to ensure equitable for our at-risk populations and for our communities of color as well. It's not fair to dump this all on people who may be at risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeLauro. We're ready for our next public participant, Anthony. The other Anthony.
I don't see anyone else with their digital hands raised.
All right, so Brian, I think that you said that you had a number of public comments that you wanted to read into the record. Just organization, why don't we read the cannabis matters first and then the outdoor dining comments second.
And I'm sorry, this is Anthony. If I may interject, Margaret raised her hand and so did. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to give Margaret the floor again.
Yes, please do that. Yes.
All right, Margaret, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for joining us. You're
Hi,
up.
everyone. Hi, thank you. My name is Margaret Watt, 41 France Street. I work in behavioral health, and I'm a leader of the Norwalk Partnership, which is our community coalition dedicated to preventing substance misuse in youth and young adults. I'm here in support of the moratorium. As of a news report yesterday, out of 120 Connecticut municipalities that were surveyed, 63% have now either passed a moratorium or outright prohibited future cannabis sales. Why? Because they recognize that we shouldn't be rushing into a new drug market without being prepared to handle the known impacts and also the possible unintended consequences. Communities like ours need the gift of time to study needs, develop plans, and build awareness. So let's talk about what some of the predictable impacts are that we're going to need to plan for. Norwalk is likely to become the marijuana hub for surrounding communities, as some people have already mentioned. Westport, Weston, and New Canaan have already prohibited cannabis sales. Other towns around us have a moratorium. So if we become the sales hub, that will bring in some revenue, but it also means we need time to plan for traffic and parking and law enforcement to deal with impaired driving. The city is going to need to identify the one required space, according to the law, where people can use cannabis in public. And in particular, we're going to need to raise awareness about where that is, because even last year, before the new law passed, there was already increased consumption in plain sight of law enforcement, like at the beaches. People thought that it was now legal everywhere. We also need to look at zoning. Is Norwalk going to regulate outlet density, or are we going to allow certain neighborhoods like Sono, which already has all these new vape and hookah shops ready to go, to become marijuana destinations? Sono, as we all know, used to have a reputation for drug and crime activity, which the city worked really hard to redress. Today, we have high-end retailers there like Nordstrom's. That means we also need to think about regulating signage and advertising so that the high-end retailers and the drug retailers aren't markets that are competing with each other. And even more importantly, so that kids in that neighborhood don't grow up surrounded by drug ads and drug public consumption on the streets. Now, what are some of the possible unintended consequences we need to be aware of and planning for? A recent nationwide study identified the following consequences in states that had already legalized cannabis. 1/3 higher use of marijuana by teens, 25% increase in marijuana addiction among teens, doubling of marijuana-related calls to poison control centers, increased black market for marijuana because people didn't actually go to the retailers as much as expected, increase in traffic accidents and fatalities involving marijuana. Then there are other consequences from a behavioral health perspective. The high THC in today's marijuana actually increases marijuana rather than increases anxiety rather than decrease it. Connecticut hospitals have seen a 300% increase in psychosis admissions due to marijuana. Back in December, we had Norwalk high schoolers going to the ER from dabbing very strong THC. At the time, people thought that it was involved fentanyl. It was literally just marijuana. In other states also, there's increased use of emergency rooms by kids because of the use of edibles. So if we want to be ready to minimize some of these issues that are likely to occur, we're going to need public education, compliance checks, and support for law enforcement. I want to share that at the Norwalk Partnership, we did survey both teens and adults in Norwalk last year about substance use. And our data shows that there's a need to raise awareness about existing substance use laws and risks, let alone changes related to marijuana. For example, 29% of Norwalk adults still don't know the legal age of vaping is 21, and that may account for some of the increase in vaping again in our schools right now. 36% don't know about the social host law, which is going to apply to marijuana as well as alcohol. 1/3 of our teens think that if they use marijuana a couple times a week, it's not risky, but that's literally the level of use in teens that's associated with IQ loss, later opioid use, addiction, and psychosis. So in other words, we're about to open up a market for an addictive drug for a consumer base that isn't really educated about the product yet. So that's just one more reason to not rush into this. Let's take the time to study our community's needs. Let's watch what happens in Stamford and Bridgeport. Let's look at our regs. Let's look at how to use our tax revenue to offset the risks to our kids by funding prevention. So the Norwalk Partnership is here in town, and we really look forward to collaborating with the city on this effort to make this process as safe and equitable and streamlined as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Margaret, do you want me to just add your written statement to the record at the back of the minutes, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, Brian, you can add it there. I did throw in a hyperlink to a sample ordinance that you might want to look at. And I also threw in a couple of photos with comments of like, here are some things to consider from an ordinance perspective around advertising and things like that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Terrific. All right, Anthony, I think you said that there's one more person of the public that wants to speak tonight.
Correct. We have Diane Lorzello with their hands raised. And Diane, you have the floor.
Yeah, there she is.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman and the committee. I may have missed your directive, Madam Chairwoman, but I am here to speak on the second public hearing, and I did not know if I should speak now, or will you call that after you discuss the results of this first meeting?
No, I think it's perfectly okay to speak now, and we can take your comment into consideration when we discuss the outdoor dining, if that's what you're speaking on.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll be very, very quick. Very interesting comments in the first one. Anyway, for the record, my name is Diane Lorzello, and I really appreciate that this committee is looking at refining the outdoor dining standards and guidelines. As a former regulator with the Department of Environmental Protection, I'm one who really does believe in user-friendly permitting and making sure that our standards are clear. Just some things kind of, as I read through, some things stood out to me that I just wanted you to consider. First of all, I do appreciate that there is a mention of enforcement-related fines and the like. But of course, we want to make sure that we have the staff and the resources to do that. I have noticed I also am very pleased that there was a mention of the noise issue. The noise ordinance currently, and it's something that I will be writing to you, Madam Chairwoman, the revised noise ordinance, to my knowledge, is yet to be enforced and include training. So in order to make sure we're not increasing the problems that appear when you have outdoor dining and outdoor noise increased, we have to make sure that we care about the neighborhoods and the residents that have invested in condominiums or homes nearby, as I'm sure you all would like to. Lastly, I just wanted to state that it is the citizens of Norwalk that own the sidewalks and at times some of the parking lots where we are considering expansion of outdoor dining. I haven't been able to see yet where, and it might be in the zoning permitting program, where we are actually assessing the value of taking up and renting, literally renting public property for the outdoor dining. I love the vibrancy of having outdoor dining, but I want to make sure that the people of Norwalk, the taxpayers, are properly compensated for the use of that land. Lastly, I wanted to say that times on Washington Street, which is where we had during COVID, much of our outdoor dining, at times certain restaurants, and I really don't want to call out any one restaurant, but I will say that Match, which is a restaurant I really love, they really seem to take advantage for much of the early part of their summertime and warm weather. Their tables and chairs were literally blocking people from walking on the sidewalk. So I'm very happy that this committee is looking into this, but the one thing that's missing here is, from what I could see, and again, I did not see the zoning permit fees, but an assessment of the value of taking up public property and the rental of that space by said restaurants. So I thank you for your time. Have a good night, and I appreciate any consideration of my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucella. And Brian, now you're
Lisa,
with your reading of.
Lisa, do we want everyone else who has a public comment about outdoor dining to also speak at this time?
If there are others, we might as well.
I saw Rich Bonifant. He had sent me an email, but I didn't know if he wanted me to read his email or whether he wanted to speak.
If Mr. Bonifant, if you'd like to raise your hand if you'd rather speak, or if you would rather Brian just read your, oh, I see somebody's getting the question and answer. He doesn't have a mic, so it appears that he just wants you to read his comments.
I'll read his comments.
Great. All righty. So why don't we start with comments on cannabis and then move to outdoor dining?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. First one on cannabis is from Daniel Cicero. Good evening. My name is Daniel. I'm a Norwalk resident as well as a clinician at Norwalk Hospital's outpatient psychiatric department. I'm here to support a moratorium on cannabis sales. This is a big deal and an important one with outcomes that will impact our entire community. I work with our residents who are struggling to cope and survive with the impact of substance use is having in their lives and the lives of their loved ones. It should not come as a surprise to anyone that our community has a high population of substance users, with that population growing amongst our youth. Depression and suicidal ideation, as well as attempts, are rising as our neighbors are struggling to cope with the world as we know it. We have no control over where the world is heading. Some things are simply unavoidable, but I believe we can put the brakes on its moratorium in this area. In addition to corporate concerns such as traffic, parking, negative legal impact, DUIs, and auto collisions, we'll have the inevitable need for increased emergency interventions from our heroic civil servants, police, EMS, and hospital personnel. I possess the hope that all of those involved in the decision-making process feel the way I do, as much as the safety and well-being of our loved ones, friends, and neighbors in our community. Our community is the first priority of consideration when it comes to life-impacting decisions such as this. Hashtag Norwalk is awesome. Thank you, respectfully, Daniel Cicero. And again, Margaret Watt already spoke, and she indicated that her written statement would be attached to the minutes. I'll come back to the outdoor dining statements afterwards. Next one is from Katie Gallo. My name is Katie Gallo, and I live at 4 Overlook Road in Norwalk. I'm writing in support of the moratorium on cannabis sales. I believe that the city should take the time a moratorium would provide to assess the impact of this new retail market, develop plans with community input, and determine what regulations may be needed to address issues such as traffic, parking, and DUIs, and to prevent an increase in underage consumption, emergency visits, etc. According to Connecticut Insider, 44% of Connecticut communities have already either postponed or permanently banned marijuana sales. I'd like to see Norwalk do the same. Cannabis isn't as harmless as so many people think. So it's important to have the appropriate rules and regulations in place prior to opening up retail shops. Thank you for your consideration, Katie Gallo. Again, Denise Rowlandson also spoke, and so her written testimony will be attached to the minutes. This is from Sam Fitzgerald. A testimony before Ordinance Committee at public hearing on February 15, 2022. My name is Sam Fitzgerald. I live at 41 France Street. I'm writing in favor of the proposed moratorium of marijuana sales in Norwalk. I'm an architect and moved to Norwalk 17 years ago. When my wife and I were just starting a family, I've watched South Norwalk and Wall Street area improve significantly in those 17 years with mostly smart development and planning. Now more than ever, Norwalk has become a regional draw with its nightlife, restaurants, and shopping. This is great progress. All of our neighboring towns have banned or placed a moratorium on marijuana retailers. My fear is if we don't have a moratorium on marijuana retailers, Norwalk will become a regional drug hub with all the problems that it brings, and it could threaten all the great progress we've seen. According to Connecticut Insider, at least 75 communities in Connecticut have already banned or postponed sale of marijuana. It is smart for Norwalk to do the same. So I'm Sam Fitzgerald, 41 French Street. And then the last one is Ginger Katz. Ginger Katz, founder and CEO of the Courage to Speak Foundation, date February 15, 2022. My testimony in support of the moratorium on retail sale of cannabis in Norwalk. My name is Ginger Katz, and I'm a local resident and the founder of the Courage to Speak Foundation, a nonprofit organization located in Norwalk, Connecticut, that has been providing drug prevention programs to youth, young adults, and parents for the past 25 years. We have served thousands of youth and parents in Norwalk since my husband and I started the Courage to Speak Foundation in 1996. Our mission is to encourage and empower youth to be drug-free. In addition, I serve on the Norwalk Prevention Coalition as a core member of the leadership team. I am in support of a moratorium on the retail sale of cannabis. In Norwalk, the delay would allow the city to conduct more research to put effective protocols into place concerning where and how cannabis will be sold in Norwalk. This will allow planning for traffic, parking, and other considerations that should be taken into account. Since Norwalk will likely see an increase in shoppers from other communities like Westport and Weston, which have permanently banned cannabis sales. Most importantly, it is critical that we allow our community leaders more time to plan for the ramifications of introducing easy access to cannabis in our community, which research shows will provide easier access to cannabis by youth. Allowing this to happen will be detrimental to our youth and subsequently our community. It will also be extremely taxing on our mental health system because cannabis can trigger to a first mental health break for youth. Connecticut hospitals have already seen a 300% increase in cannabis-induced psychoses due to very high THC levels in cannabis products. I've had a personal experience with how the introduction of marijuana led to the death of my child, my own son, Ian James Icarino, and a Norwalk High School graduate. At the age of 13, Ian started using marijuana, and he often came to me in his high school years and said, "Mom, I can't concentrate." In Ian's sophomore year of college, he called me in tears begging for help. "I'm addicted to heroin and I can't stop. Please come and help me." Only a few months later, Ian died in his sleep of a drug overdose, which consisted of heroin and a prescription drug. When I found him, my cries for help were heard 2 blocks away. Ian was only 20 years old. I believe that marijuana was the drug that led my son Ian to the drugs that killed him. Ian was a bright college student and a talented athlete with a very promising future ahead of him. What started out as an occasional use of marijuana at age 13 led to his untimely death of a drug overdose at just age 20. Now that research on youth drugs use has advanced, we know that youths who start with marijuana move on to other deadly drugs. With retail shops opening in Norwalk, more drugs will be circulating and making the probability of marijuana getting into the hands of our youth even greater. To devise an effective plan, we must need more time to develop zoning plans and educational campaigns that will keep our children safe. Mental health issues are on the rise amongst our youth, including difficulties with anxiety, depression, and suicide. The COVID pandemic has exacerbated mental health issues in youth, causing them to turn drugs to self-medicate. How prepared are we for the increase in mental health services? Newark Hospital is losing its psychiatric beds, which are moving to Danbury Hospital. Community organization will need more time to fortify preventative strategies to address both increases in drug use and the need for outpatient mental health treatment. It is imperative to our children's health and well-being that we convince you of the huge role marijuana plays in teenage risky behavior. We receive many emails and letters from children stating that they or their friends smoke marijuana. Many children do not stop at that. 12 to 17-year-olds who use marijuana are 85 times more likely to use cocaine. 60% of adolescents who use marijuana before 15 will later use cocaine or another illicit drug. This source is the National Center of Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, abbreviation CASA. I am certain that once cannabis sales begin in Norwalk, we will increase the number of children who will get addicted, just as in Colorado, where teens requiring drug treatment have increased. Within 4 years of the state legalizing it, marijuana use by Colorado teens had increased by 65%. That's a September 2016 study. Just this past year, a national study by SMART Approaches to Marijuana looked at the impact in states that had legalized cannabis. The study there found that 25% increase in addiction to cannabis among teens 12 to 17. Then the site is provided. Please allow us more time to ensure that our youth will be safe in Norwalk, where access to cannabis use is surely to rise. We owe it to our children. Ginger Katz, founder of the Courage to Speak Foundation, Norwalk, Connecticut, www.couragetospeak.org. Those are all of the written statements about cannabis.
Great. And do we just have one on outdoor dining?
I believe so, but let me double check.
We could read that one and then we'll start the discussion among the committee.
Yep, it's just Rich Bonifant. He asked me to read this, and obviously he had issues with his microphone, so I'll read Rich's statement. Richard Bonifant, 17 Park Hill Avenue, Norwalk, Connecticut, 06851. Letter dated February 14, 2022. Dear neighbor, on Tuesday, February 15th at 7 p.m., the Common Council's Ordinance Committee will hold a public hearing to revise the rules on outdoor dining on private and public property and plan to allow operations every day of the week until 11 p.m., not just on front sidewalks, but any portion of the properties. Enclosed is the text as published in the hour of the proposed ordinance. I don't have that enclosure. I just have his letter. As you recall, there were several evenings last summer where an abutting restaurant on Westport Avenue took liberty of having loud parties that disturbed our neighborhood. And my concern is that this will occur again this upcoming summer. I spoke at the ordinance committee meeting and asked last ordinance committee meeting and asked that the committee recognize the difference between commercial front sidewalk dining and parties in rear parking lots which border residential backyards. It's obvious that the committee didn't care about any residents or others in similar situations, refused to consider all affected persons, and merely said to call the police when things got out of hand. We want to enjoy our backyards peacefully on summer nights, but unfortunately the committee made it clear they are choosing businesses over quality of life of our neighbors. You can comment at the public hearing through the city's meeting Zoom link, and it provides the link, or send an email to the ordinance committee staff member Brian Candela and my email address. If you want your views heard, however, the sense I get is that you are wasting your time with the committee and they may have a better chance for any consideration by writing the full Common Council, who will most likely act on this next week to send correspondence to all council members. And he provides the Common Council member link, which is commoncouncil3@norwalkct.org. Thank you, Richard Bonifant.
Great. Thank you so very much. So I'm hearing no further participants who need to be heard. We can close the public hearings and begin the discussion. Anthony, right, there's nobody else who's come late, because I know that there were some people having trouble getting in. Does it appear that we've covered everybody?
I appear so, yes.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so we'll open the discussion about the vote on the temporary prohibition of all cannabis establishments. Brian is sharing his screen. As an opening statement, what I would like to say is that following up on Margaret Watt's comments, yes, 75 jurisdictions in the state of Connecticut have considered whether or not to have a ban. 22 of them have instituted a full ban, and 53 are putting moratoriums such as ours in place so that they can take more time to consider what the cannabis establishment retail situation should look like in their town. And that's exactly what we're doing. We really want to hear from everybody in the city of Norwalk. We want to hear what the neighborhoods have to say, what the retailers have to say, what the recovery community has to say about what they think about where these establishments, well, should we have these establishments? Where should they be? What types of rules should we be imposing? And this committee has offered to work with Steve Kleppen at Planning and Zoning and with our Economic and Development Group to consider public hearings so that we can go out into the community and really hear what people have to say about this measure. Before we get into the cannabis legislation that we're considering, does any other committee members have anything they'd like to say on this matter before we get started? And I can't see everybody's hands because we're in the cartoon strips, but it doesn't appear as though anybody does. Okay, so Brian, if you'd like to begin the presentation, that would be great. Reshare your screen and yeah. There we go.
Be helpful if I took myself off mute. This is the draft temporary prohibition of all cannabis establishments. This language has been used by other municipalities in the surrounding towns that have a desire to place a temporary prohibition of all cannabis establishments, for example, such as Westport. We were given a nice assist by Attorney Nick Belmonte, and he was able to provide a lot of helpful information, including this draft language. And as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. And it's the prohibition as it is right now is for a period of 9 months, and it would become effective 10 days following, if approved by this committee and sent to Common Council. It would be, and if it was approved by the Common Council, it'd become effective 10 days following approval by the City of Norwalk's Common Council.
Great. So this is going to be the ordinance that we'd like to be voting on tonight to take to Common Council. So Nora, do you have a question? And then we can move to a vote unless there's other comments.
No, I do have a question, and I apologize if I thought I had raised this earlier and perhaps I didn't, and so I apologize. So my question is that, the applications are currently open for the first 12 establishments, 6 of which are social equity applicants, which Norwalk would qualify as. To the best of my knowledge, there has been no decision about when they will release the next set of applicants, because my understanding is that the state also wishes to sort of monitor this process. As I understand it, and again, I could be wrong, and that's part of the clarification I think we had asked for when we had a conversation with Nick about this. But as I understand it, the applicants have to specify the city when they file their application. However, no one is opening these establishments in the next couple of months. The projections are the end of the year or early next year. So I am concerned that this moratorium keeps us from being included in the first 12 applications, even though we would have plenty of time to actually address these issues if we were partnering with one of those applicants. So my question is whether there is language that can be inserted to clarify that if there is particularly a social equity applicant, as I know that that is a particular concern to a number of members of the council, if there is a valid social equity applicant who wishes to locate in Norwalk and is willing to abide by the zoning regulations when they are developed, can such a person still apply based on this moratorium? And if not, is there language we can insert that would allow such an application?
Ryan, I don't really know if I know exactly the answer to that. And I don't know, it seems as though other municipalities are using this, or did they consider this concern as well? Do we know?
Don't know. I can read you an email that I received from Nick Belmonte. I don't know if this answers the question. If that is the question and this doesn't answer it, then we would have to go back and conduct more research on that particular issue. So Nick indicates in the email, I'll just read the email for the part of it that I have. As far as the question posed last meeting about whether a location is required on the state licensure application, I'm sure this isn't the answer to the question. Here is the answer. The location has no bearing at this early stage of the state licensure process and is not required on the initial lottery applications. There are 3 main stages that will occur for qualified social equity applicants and the general public. Lottery to determine which applicants will receive the limited number of licenses currently available, provisional application review and approval, and then final application review, approval, and licensure. It will not be necessary for any applicant. It will be necessary for an applicant to provide proof of the right to occupy a location depending on the establishment type and any local laws in effect at that time. This may include local zoning approval until the final licensure review.
Actually, that is very helpful because that does suggest that someone could submit an application before the May deadline with Norwalk in mind, but not be constrained from having that application considered. So actually, that is helpful. That does alleviate my concern.
Okay.
I think it may be a concern we need to address, over the next couple of months, but for tonight, that alleviates my concern. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, I think, how I understand it is that somebody could apply for this permit and they wouldn't be asked, or licensed, and they wouldn't be asked, well, all right, do you already have a location in mind? Has the local municipality already approved this location? They can apply without it.
That would seem right. If everybody's doing these moratoriums, it would seem like they would be making it more difficult if they would have such a barrier. Mr. Hupelman, you had your hand raised. Are you still?
No, it was similar to that because it would preclude us having to make a very different decision if that were the case, and it doesn't. So that's fine. Thank you.
Good. And Ms. Young, I saw your hand raised earlier as well. Are you satisfied?
Similar to that. My only concern, though, it sounds as if we need to get some things in place if we do decide to move forward with this, as far as zoning is concerned, and the locations, right? Because clearly the conversation has centered around having these facilities in areas that have been impacted negatively by the drug industry. And so I know that I, along with Ms. Revelous, have been clear about what our feelings are about where these places are located. But it just seems like something that we need to decide as far as the zoning requirements pretty quickly.
Yes.
Well, by the time this moratorium is lifted, if it is lifted.
Exactly, in 9 months. That's the whole idea, to buy time. And I guess if we're not ready in 9 months, we can revisit this moratorium at that time. Mr. Goldstein.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add was, and I think Councilwoman Young said this well. I mean, there are a lot of concerns and a lot of different moving parts to this particular subject. The moratorium will buy us time to figure out a lot of this and reach out to stakeholders, affected communities, and also learn more about what we as a municipality can do in terms of the in terms of the 3% revenue that gets received, and really work out a lot of different questions. The moratorium is not just to push this off, but it's actually to buy us time. And I know that you and I have spoken about this, but to do a really deliberative effort, and if we're gonna do this, compose a multifaceted ordinance that covers issues ranging from zoning to the equity issues associated with the subject in the spirit of the state law. So I think that this moratorium is a prudent and smart move right now. I know I've spoken with a bunch of you to, sort of work through, and Councilman Keegan and I have spoken with a bunch of you to work through this process and make sure that if we do come up with an ordinance to go forward with this, that it's going to be thoughtful and well thought out.
Great, thank you. And again, we want to emphasize the fact that we've all committed to having a robust public hearing on where these things should go, and reaching out to a lot of different aspects of our communities to get a lot of feedback on every aspect of this type of licensing. So if there are no further comments, I would like to call a vote to vote on the temporary prohibition of all cannabis establishments, as we've named this ordinance. And we will send it to Common Council at our next meeting, which would be next month. So all in favor, I'm going to wait until we have a screen, we can see each other. It looks like
it's Lisa, it would go, if it's being approved to go to Common Council, it'd be the 22nd of February.
Yes, thank you. It would be next week. Great, thank you. So all in favor of moving the temporary ban to Common Council for next month? That appears to be
Fleet, but
unanimous.
yes.
Yes, great, thank you. All right, so the next conversation we're going to have is to discuss and vote on Chapter 45, Article 4, outdoor dining. And we can bring up, we've had the public comment on that. Jess and Brian, there were a couple of comments. We did take our revised version of the, oh, by the way, we do need to move Bill Ireland from, I think he says a participant right now. He needs to be moved to panelist, just in case there's questions that go to him. Forgive me for not doing that earlier. Jess and Brian, Jess did take the outdoor dining ordinance to DPW, Mr. Ireland, the public health groups, just to make sure that everybody saw the latest and greatest language of our version of this. We might be on version numbers 4 or 5 now. And there are a couple little tweaks that I think that we wanted to discuss. So Brian, if you could share your screen, and Jess, maybe you could walk us through some of the comments that were made by city staff, just to clarify a couple of items before we discuss and vote taking this to council.
Sure, happy to comment. So as mentioned, we brought it to DPW, the police department, building and code enforcement, planning and zoning, as well as others, and received some comments. I wouldn't say, I think, Brian, you can probably cover anything that I missed, but I think in general, we got fairly positive comments, and everyone feels fairly comfortable with the way in which this is moving forward. The one piece that we did talk about was the ADA compliance and making sure that the language in the ordinance meets the ADA code. And so we were very particular about looking over that. We also wanted to make sure that the language was cleared up as far as where outdoor dining is allowed, where it's not allowed. We also wanted to ensure that any future outdoor dining programs, such as parklets or extensions of outdoor dining, was covered in the ordinance, and that the language was inclusive enough to be able to do that. And so that was an item that was also addressed. We did talk a little bit about what belonged in the ordinance, which versus what belonged in guidance and standards. And so we talked a little bit about the process in which DPW may need different levels of insurance or different levels of bonds, depending on the proposed outdoor dining area. And if there are installations on the sidewalk or in the right of way. So we decided that that should go in guidelines and standards. But in general, we got really positive feedback. We included not only the ordinance for folks to look at, but also the guidance and standards as well. Brian, did I miss anything?
Just that the guidance and standards is a draft. We think it's a pretty good draft, but it's a draft. So if there are any comments on it, either now or if this is a move to Common Council and if there's any comments there, it's nimble enough that it can be revised and still provide the guidance for the businesses trying to go through this process.
And we should be very clear that the guidelines are not going to be voted on by the Common Council, and that's really for the expertise of the staff. The only thing that will really become before the Common Council is the ordinance itself. The guidelines are intended to be something that's of a, it's a living document. So as we learn and grow in using these guidelines, they may well become refined from time to time, and we want them to have that flexibility and not have to go through council every single time.
And yeah, I'm sorry to jump around a little bit. I just wanted to show some of the people, so the ordinance committee, what we're talking about. So for example,
yeah, can we go through all of the changes, Brian, from the top?
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of them. There's just a couple of them that were made by staff.
Right. So there's
David, I see you want to have you've got a comment. I'll come to you.
Yeah, so the comments made by staff, I think it's easier to kind of go through them. For example, go with what Broderick Sawyer, the fire marshal, provided, and then also Bill Ireland, because they were specifically located on one thing. And then Vanessa Valadares from DPW provided us with a lot of good comments specifically about the right of way, and we can go through those as well. But if you take a look at, I should have come from the top because then I could tell you exactly. So it's 4531 operation, and I'm looking at subsection G now, and it's talking about outdoor dining shall not be located in front of, and it lists a number of things. And so Broderick Sawyer's concern as a fire marshal is that people do not attach things to fire protection gear or any kind of fire protection feature, such as a fire hydrant. So as you can see here, the recommended change based on our conversation with Mr. Sawyer was outdoor dining shall not be located in front of or otherwise obstruct in any manner police, fire department, or other first responder access to any building or property, or, and we can omit that other part, to any fire protection feature, including but not limited to any and all fire hydrants. Anything more specific in that would be in the guidelines, but that was something that Broderick thought would be helpful in the ordinance as something to point out to people that you cannot obstruct fire protection equipment and gear in any way, shape, or form, and then we can get into more specifics in the guidelines. But so the only change here would be in any manner. The part that I'm highlighting down here would be removed because that's where we had it originally, and we thought it made more sense up there.
Yeah, and why don't you go ahead and remove that so we remember to do it? Perfect. All right.
If there's no comments about that, I can go to what Mr. Ireland was talking about. If Broderick has, I know Broderick's here. If Broderick has any comments about that, or he wants to add something more, please, Broderick, jump in and make me sound smarter.
Otherwise, we can keep moving.
No.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Broderick.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. And then I'm going to go back from the top because I have to find where Mr. Ireland made his comment. And then we can go to DPW's comments. And then obviously any questions that anyone else has after that. Where's Mr. There it is. So we are in 4531 again. And this is subsection E, I believe. Nope, F. And this is talking about the amount of clearance that's required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And you can see in the guidelines that we have very specific language about the amount of clearance that is required for unimpeded pedestrian traffic. And so we probably want to make this language in F as simple as possible, probably just saying that the food service establishment shall be in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then to leave the more specific language in the guidelines. But you know, that's for everyone else to decide. That's just the recommendation.
Yes, and Mr. Hillman, this is.
And Mr. Ireland is also here. I'm sorry, Lisa. Yeah. Mr. Ireland is also here.
Yes, he is. Thank you. So let me just finish my comment, which is, Mr. Hillman, this was in reference to your comments about where do you measure the 5 feet from, where's the 4 feet from? And we thought that that was just too tedious to get into in an ordinance. And so we thought it best to say that we have to comply with ADA and then have any types of details go into the guidelines. And I think I just saw the chief's hand raised over something. Chief Kowalik, do you have a comment? Good evening, Chief.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us.
Yep, sorry, I was trying to unmute. I just had a question regarding what the final decision was regarding the hours that this would take effect.
Oh, we'll get to
the
that.
hours,
Okay.
and also whether alcohol would be allowed without food late into the evening. That's my two concerns.
Okay, great. Can we address those after we talk about these little changes we're making right now? Let's do that. Okay, so let's finish going through the tiny changes.
Chairman, I'm just happy to see that this is in here because I think I made some comments about that as well, but I know that you will get into more detail about the ADA requirement. So thank you for that.
And Darlene, just to I think that's a good point, and let me just show everybody specifically what we're talking about. I can just pull up the guidelines real quick. Bear with me.
Right, and I think while you do that, the other point too was that if we leave the language as it's proposed in the ordinance, then if the ADA compliance ever changes, then we are able to change that on the fly in the guidance and not have to go through the public hearing process to make changes to the ordinance. So it allows us to be a lot more nimble in being able to make sure that the ADA compliance is in practice.
Yes,
Right,
thank you
and-
for reminding me about that comment. That was definitely one of our concerns.
And Darlene, you can see right here, this is in the guidelines, and I'm more than happy to, I'm more than happy to send you a copy of the draft that we have so far. But as you can see, David, as well, the concern about 4 feet and 5 feet, we consulted with Mr. Ireland about this. He provided us with the ICC sections and things of that nature. And so you can see that this is getting very specific. And we can leave the ordinance to basically say, you have to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then here we can provide specific detail. And this is a document that the applicant would have to look at and also comply with, or else be subject to enforcement, penalties, fines, revocation, things of that nature. So this is a more specific item about the thing that we were just talking about, but I wanted to show you that it is in the guidelines and regulations.
Thank you. And would those fines be determined at a later date, right? That'll be a part of the whole packet, right? Of what the fines look like. And
Well, we have a fine section. Fine section is 45
okay.
fines and revocations. And so yes, we have a first offense where you're warned. Second offense is the usual 250, which is, is the highest we can fine. And then, you're subject to perhaps not having your permit renewed. So
Yeah, so
250 is
Darlene,
pretty low, isn't it?
yeah,
that's
so
all we can do pursuant to law.
So Darlene, it's 250 for each violation, and you can fine somebody if they're not in compliance. After 24 hours, it becomes a second violation. So the first offense is a written warning. The second offense, you start getting fined. And really, I think the thing that, gives it some teeth is the fact that you can have your permit revoked, number one. And number two, if you get through the year and people have complained or and it's just some things haven't, your permit wasn't revoked, but you got fined, and you try to come back the following year and to get a new permit for it. It's about being a good neighbor. It's the people that are the deep planning and zoning and the people that are making this decision can go back and take a look at the file and see, were you a good neighbor when you were doing this the year prior or 2 years prior? And based on that, they don't have to give you this permit back the following year. So it's not only the fine, but it's also the fact that you might not get this permit the following year if you're not living up to the guidelines and the ordinance and things of that nature.
Right. And just to further address that, Brian, I heard some of the comments on noise from the public, and we've been working really closely with the chief and the police department to be able to establish a clear procedure and process to be able to ensure that we have active communication in place between the police department and planning and zoning, so that if there is a noise ordinance violation or there is a violation in the evening, we're able to communicate that to planning and zoning to be able to keep that in a file for the actual establishment itself. So we want to make sure that that process is working the way that it is. And thank you to the chief for being able to work with us on that. So I think we're in a good place there.
Yeah, that's absolutely essential. The communication part's absolutely essential. Nora, do you have a comment on these changes?
Just very quickly, I just wanted to confirm that you're not including in there the specific language regarding the exact ICC and ADA sections. That's going in the guidance, but you'll just say ADA compliance in the ordinance.
Yeah, the subsection F that you can see on my screen now will basically just read, obviously you guys have to approve the language change, but it's going to say the food service establishment shall comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think we should leave it as simple as that.
Yes, I think we should too. And if you would make that change so that when we vote on it, that's exactly what we're sending over to council. Thank you for clarifying that, Nora, so we didn't miss picking that up. All right, so once you make that change, Brian, we will move forward, and the word comply needs to be properly spelled.
Yeah, and I'll just note, Brian, that ADA is used above or someplace else. It's just ADA. I think it should be defined someplace.
Yeah.
It's used in H.
H, hold on.
It just says ADA.
All right.
That might just be like to remind us to bring that comment forward.
That is H below F.
There is. I mean, yeah, ADA access.
Perfect.
Is it
You
worth,
might just put Americans with Disability Act access.
Or you can put ADA up above, either one.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can like, so, parentheses, quotes.
Yeah.
Is it duplicative to have it in both?
It's okay.
I think you're okay. Brian, I would just go back and say as amended from time to time, since
Yeah.
you're going to say the act.
You have that as amended from time to time. I think you just need to get rid of the stuff that goes in between. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, but the
Oh, see, I
that goes before the parenthetical.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. Yep.
Do you think it's worthwhile to put ADA in the definition of the ordinance itself, or that's just overdone?
It's only used twice. I don't think you need to. You could
Okay.
obviously, but I don't.
Yeah, I think it's okay this way.
Okay.
Okay, great. Comply is properly spelled. Okay.
Chief has got his hand raised.
Yeah, I think his hand's been raised the whole time, and the two
Okay.
comments he wants, we'll go back to his two comments that he wants. Any other amendments that we're going to, and Nora, are your hand's still up?
I do have a couple, but I mean.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't have Vanessa's yet, and then Tom will go to you with your comments.
Do you want me to go through the what DPW said, or do you want me to do all the other comments first? It's up to you. It doesn't really bother me one way or the other.
Well, DPW, and then have you gotten Tom's already?
No,
Or
not
Tom?
yet.
Okay, so
Why don't we do Tom's first?
okay.
Okay, I sent you the one in section on the what was it? Was it maybe this is on C4. I remember I sent you those comments. I was hoping you'd have them, so I don't have to go find them.
Yeah. Yeah, right there in case of the application.
Yeah. Yeah, so just so everybody understands this, go back up. So this language relates to denying a permit or declining to renew a permit or revoking a permit. And I put in suggesting language in 4 because that really doesn't work in the case of a initial permit. It really only applies when you're, I'm sorry, no, it doesn't apply in the case of in the case of applications for permanent renewal. I gotta get my head around this. It's 4 doesn't cover all those things. Sorry, my mind's elsewhere. If you walk through it, director of planning and zoning may deny a permit or decline to review a permit, blah, blah, blah. If they 1, violate, 2, fail to correct, 3 is delinquent. And so.
This isn't the case when they're applying it, but they have violations that come in before.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, is this the language I gave you, Brian? Because it looks a little different.
Hold on. I can go find the email.
I'm sure it is.
Anyway, this is one of the things where I think the chief wanted to address because he's concerned about noise, isn't he? The 2 concerns the chief had was noise as well as food and alcohol. So I don't see him on the list anymore, but we'll address those in discussion.
Yeah, okay, now I'm seeing it. Okay, so this last clause refers to 2 years preceding the filing of a permit. And so that didn't seem to make sense. Where you're we deny a permit, decline to renew a permit, or revoke a permit. In my language, I need to see the language.
I'm gonna find it, Tom. Give me 1 second. There's a
Sorry,
bunch of email.
I can try and find it too.
Oh, here it is. My concern with 4930 C4 below. It works for initial filers and with my changes, renewals, but I don't think it works for revocations. And so in the case of applications, take a look at, I'm reading your email, so just let me know if it's the same. It says subsection 4, in the case of applications for a permit or renewal thereof under this chapter and then has had 2 or more violations. Is that?
Yeah, and that's because as I said, the first part, it doesn't, the 2-year look back doesn't work in the other situation.
In the revocation situation?
Yeah, because you can revoke something. It doesn't make sense to look. You should have known when you gave the permit in the first place that they have these violations. But if you're going to revoke it for something done 2 years ago,
Right.
it didn't really make a lot of sense. So I just thought that should apply just to the other 2 situations.
I agree. You're not looking back if you're revoking, you're done.
Right. You're looking. It doesn't. It just seemed like, as I said, didn't work.
I got it. I think
I know
that
I'm not articulating it well because my mind's a little burnt right now, but
for a good reason. But I think that the point that you're making is that, right, it doesn't apply in the case of revocations. It only
Yeah.
applies when you're renewing or applying in the first case.
yeah. And I just wanted to give you, while I got the floor, a couple typos.
Sure.
And this is on 32H. We just did this.
32.
It's a typo. Yeah, you passed it, sorry. Did it go up a little bit? Outdoor
Oh.
dining, the D should be capitalized.
Yep.
Yes.
And then on 32C, it says the zoning, director of planning and zoning, or his, her, their. It should be or their designee. Okay, go down, it should be outdoor dining guidelines and standards.
And is there like a dash there? I can't really, oh, is that because
It's
you
just a
capitalized? Oh,
space.
gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And then on the next 33, in the first line, again, it's his, her, or their
Thank you.
designee. And we need the word or, and that's it.
Okay. Great.
Thanks for
So-
indulging me, thanks.
So the last
Right.
set of comments is DPW, Brian?
Yes, Vanessa was kind enough to go through this and also the guidelines. And as you can see from her, you'll see these changes throughout. She wanted the city's right of way to also be included. So as you can see in 4530 subsection A, a food service establishment may be permitted to offer outdoor dining on private property, public property, and or the city's right of way. I don't think we need in the city. Well, I think we can get rid of and or the right of way. I don't think we need the city's right of way and or the right of way in the city of Norwalk. So I think we get rid of the cities. Or no, I guess maybe we need the city's right of way in the city of Norwalk.
I think so.
So I think we need the.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you can see in 4530 subsection B, again, in subsection 2 of this section, city-owned property, including but not limited to public parking spaces and the city's right-of-way, provided that the food service establishment has written permission of the city. And this is about using that property. Again, a lot of these inclusions were just to add the right-of-way. There are some more significant changes, which I'll show you. And 4530 C5. This had to do with bonding. We added the bonding and the fact that they're going to have to go to DPW to get permits. So there's going to be bonding requirements. Again, the amount of the bond will depend on the size of the project and what's being asked. But basically this says any food service establishment approved by planning and zoning to operate in the city of Norwalk's right of way shall obtain all necessary permits, including but not limited to Department of Public Works encroachment permits. And then we are going to remove the insurance and bonds portion because we switched that over to the guidelines if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, and if you
I'm
could
sorry,
just
that's the
delete
5,000. That's the $5,000 bond check in case for breakdown, set up, whatever. That's what we're talking about, right?
For most of the time would be a $5,000 bond.
And okay, and by the way, is every applicant required to hand over that check? Just as, I mean, when you read the guidelines, that's what I thought it meant, but I could be wrong.
It's only required for, so just a few, I think probably spend some time on this one. There's a few comments to make, but one is that if it's on the city's right of way, then that's where the $5,000 bond comes in. So the bond would not come in if it was not on city-owned property. And the same with the insurance. We want to make sure that the establishment is liable for any risk as opposed to the city. So the certificate of insurance and the bond would come through based on city property or right of way.
And we would also be named as an additional insured. City of Norwalk could be named as an additional insured on any of those certificates of insurance.
Right, and that's laid out in the guidelines and standards.
Right.
But one of the things that I think is important here is that a larger percentage of the applicants who come through require the encroachment permit because they are potentially on city right of way or on city owned property. However, you'll see in the guidelines and standards that we also expect that people are going to get permitted for tents, they're going to get permitted for heating devices, they're going to get permitted for any additional electrical setup that they may do as well. So one of the things I think that should be discussed is if we want to put in, if the committee wants to put in specific language on the encroachment permit, or if there should be language that basically comments that all necessary permits are required in order to be able to meet the needs of outdoor dining. And I say that because my concern is that if we put in encroachment permits only, then it almost seems like the other permits are not required versus putting in a little bit more generic language, which would then say all permits are required for outdoor dining, regardless of the department, right? So I'll leave it sort of there for the committee to discuss, but I'm a little concerned that one, we don't want to get into a laundry list in the ordinance, the outdoor dining ordinance, because we want to make sure that everyone is paying attention to what they need. But second of all, we also want to ensure that people know that they need additional permits for outdoor dining and that it's not just as simple as getting the stamp from planning and zoning.
I would agree that we want to keep it as general as possible so that people don't point to the ordinance and say, oh, you mentioned encroachment permits, but you're not mentioning all the other permits. Even if we have including but not limited to.
Yeah, exactly. We do say that. And don't we say the planning and zoning permits earlier in the document?
Well, the planning and zoning permit is the outdoor dining permit.
Right.
So the tent permit, the electrical permit, and the heating device permits, those are all going to go through building and code enforcement and also go through Broderick at the fire department.
Right.
So that's where we start to get, I'm a little worried that if we name one, that we're making it seem like the one is required and the other ones are not. But
so you just want to put a period at the end of it. You want to say any food service establishment approved by planning and zoning to operate in the city of Newark right away shall obtain all necessary permits, period.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that. Any other comments from the committee about that? That seems like the right way to go.
Can I just clarify though, because it sounds like there might still be permits needed even if they're not in the city's right of way. If they, for instance, need a fire permit, would that apply whether they're in the city's right of way or not?
That's a really good point. And even if they are not in the city's right of way or on city property, they would still require the electrical permit or the heating permit or any other permit, a tent permit.
So let's just take right away out and say planning and zoning to operate in the city of Norwalk shall obtain all necessary permits.
Correct. And then in the guidelines and the standards, we have the encroachment permit and the tent permit, the electrical permit. We have a list of permits that we've seen restaurants have to apply for and have to get approval for. But we've also then talked about revising the site plan requirements so that the site plan describes any decorative or any sort of pieces that any elements that the establishment may include in their setup. And then that way we can flag in advance that they would need an electrical permit or they would need a tent permit or so on and so forth. So we've tried to flag that in the actual online application. And just for folks to know, we spoke with DPW and we've been all of the establishments that have ever gotten an outdoor dining permit in the past have gotten an encroachment permit when necessary. So usually what happens is the application comes in, it goes through to different departments. If the different departments flag an issue, like an increase in insurance or an increase in a bond requirement, or an encroachment permit is required, then those departments reach out to the restaurateur or the food service establishment on their own. They get what they need, and then when they get what they need, we save that and basically then give the information to P&Z for the approval.
I'm sorry to go back. I don't understand why you need this section when you have 31A.
Yeah, I think we added it because we were worried about DPW. DPW sort of forced it in because they were concerned about the encroachments, but I think it should be covered under that other section perhaps.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That was intention of that section.
Yeah. So rather than be duplicative, should we just delete this entirely? I mean, I think Anthony's on. I want to make sure that Anthony's comfortable with that decision.
Well, you get a permit under a regulation, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's duplicative.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, we have no objection. If it is duplicative language and covered in the other section, then at that point, they really can't do one and not the other. So we have no objection if that section's removed.
I think it's just a little cleaner. So thank you, Anthony.
As
You're
long as we point, my concern is that we make sure that we're pointing them to the guidelines to find this laundry list of permits, so that there's no question, well, you should have seen X, Y, or Z, and that then within the guidelines, you have the examples of the various situations that are going to require whether they need an electrical or whether they need this. That's all. That's my concern.
That part of the application process, Jessica?
Yeah, it is part. Yep, it is part of the application process. So basically, what they'll do is we've loaded in those questions to be able to basically flag if they require any additional permits, and then we would be able to work with them through that. But it is also in the guidelines and standards. We were very careful to add as much language as we could to basically say, the fire marshal for this, the building and code department for this, and so on and so forth. And one of the ways in which we did that was to look through and know what permits have been pulled in previous times.
And as
Great.
Mr. Livingston says, under 4530A, in response to Mr. Hoovelman's comment, it does say that in accordance with the provisions of this chapter and the outdoor dining guidelines and standards. So I think we
Yeah.
flagged it. So I think we're good.
Yeah, just so there's clarity there. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, they're connected at the hip.
And right in 4531J, which is just a single sentence here. This was another recommendation of DPW. No permanent fixtures shall be installed on city property or on the city's right of way.
Right, and I think that there's no problem putting that here and in the guidelines. It's just a good
Correct.
thing to reinforce that nothing should be placed.
Yeah, we did actually a copy and a paste on that right into the guidelines.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I
so
think-
those are all the changes that were recommended by Vanessa, Bill, Broderick, and following our conversations, I believe also, Jessica's conversations with, I believe, police as well. And I think there might have been some other people that had a chance to take a look at this prior. So these are all the changes that were noted by.
All right, Brian, could you show that last one again, please?
Sure.
And Darlene, I do see your hand up. I'm not going to ignore you.
This is in 4531J.
Okay, thank you.
Darlene, do you have a comment, or is that your hand up?
Yeah, I just have a question. So, and this may be in other documents. So what's the time frame that you're thinking about for the outdoor dining? When does it start and when would it end?
Well,
From
April
us-
1 through November, through October, November 30th.
November.
Those are the dates.
Right. And it's, was it April 1 to November 30th, I believe.
Yes,
Yeah, I think you just passed it.
that's under C2.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah, and under C3, the outdoor dining has to end at 11 p.m.
There, it's highlighted there, Darlene. And then. and
Is
then
that the standard November 30th? I mean, is that what other municipalities, that's their standard time frame?
New York City does it year round. I
Yeah.
think there's,
Okay.
a lot of
And
different.
it's actually it's not a change. It was outdoor. This was our outdoor dining season, even before COVID in the original ordinance. So we didn't change it. Although you know, it depends on if you have a really nice fall or a really nice spring to a large extent.
Okay. And just for my information, so when you set up outdoor dining in a parking lot, in a shared, what do you call it? With different stores, how do you determine how much space you can take up for outdoor dining?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And Steve's on as well from planning and zoning. So just to be clear, during COVID, when the executive order was issued and the piece of legislation was passed, one of the pieces of that legislation said that all of the parking requirements for the restaurants would be lifted. So that's when we started to see restaurants using their parking lot as an outdoor dining space because they had no requirement for parking. They didn't have to meet the local requirement for parking. But the one thing that we did not include in the ordinance from the executive order and from the piece of legislation that was passed was that parking piece. So we are basically saying that you have to be able to meet zoning for your restaurant, which would then have the parking requirement embedded in that. So I think that what we'll end up seeing moving forward is not as many parking lots and not as many parking spaces used for outdoor dining, because those restaurants then now at this particular point, as of April the 1st, those restaurants will require that parking to be able to meet the zoning requirements. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong.
No corrections.
And Darlene, if you want to specifically word this out, it's 4530.
Oh, I can't hear you. I've got
I know, I
feedback.
think somebody's got their thing on. So under 4530B is where we describe it. So generally speaking, Jess, it can be in front of the restaurant, it can be behind the restaurant, and maybe it can be next door in front of your neighbors if your neighbor says yes, is essentially the way we'll find, the way it'll populate.
That's right. Yep, that's right. And just to go beyond that, Lisa, and again, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the restaurant, we'll just use hypotheticals here, but if the restaurant has 100 parking spaces and they only require 80 parking spaces, then they could use the 20 additional parking spaces for outdoor dining because they're meeting their parking requirement under zoning, right? So that could be a possibility where they use their own private property. However, they would never be able to use 21 parking spaces because then they would start to impede on their zoning requirement. So it's not to say that they're not able to use their own private property for outdoor dining. It just is to say that they need to meet their zoning. They need to meet the parking and the zoning regs to be able to ensure that they have enough parking. And I think that that's where we start to see Rich's comments come through, where basically the restaurants were using their complete parking lots for outdoor dining areas, whereas now they won't be able to do that.
Mr. Hoovelman, it seems as though you have a comment.
I do indeed. I may be parsing this. Brian, can you go back up to 4530C1? I'm questioning the such permit shall be renewed on an annual basis. Should it be may be renewed on an annual basis? Because
I think we had this debate.
Must be renewed on an, shall sounds like the city has to issue the renewal.
David, when we did this the last time, I think I brought up this specific concern. And I believe the consensus was that because shall was used across the board, that would be used here, but someone could tell me if I'm completely wrong. Or
Well, there are other places where shall works great. I mean, in the next outdoor dining permits shall be issued on an annual operation period because it's referring to the time frame. So shall works based on the April 1st to November 30th. But this one, I
think what this is a difference between Josh and I talked about this last time. Old lawyers and younger lawyers, because the word shall means something different than Tom and me, than you and Josh. So
there are may issue states and there are shall issue states, and the question that comes is, are we
Our
are we
concern
saying
was
shall
that if
be
we kept,
renewed?
if we used the word shall differently, if we use the word must, all of a sudden people would be like, oh my God, must, shall, what are we, you know? I'm
No, I'm
not-
saying
this is
may.
not a
Wait,
hill
the
I'm
way
gonna
I
die
brought
on.
this,
I'm
yeah,
in the
the way
Lisa
I brought,
Old lawyer camp.
the way I brought this up the last time was in the sound more like more like a human camp, even though it's of course shall is the technical right legal word. But I remember Brian sent us an email about this. I thought it was the opinion of counsel's office that the word shall is the one that should stay for now. Otherwise, it would require some significant revisions to ordinances. But I don't think, David, that when you read, I mean, personally, when you read this particular section, that people are going to be misled over the use of the word shall here. But that's just me.
I'm not arguing shall or must. I'm saying shall or may, because we have later that you can revoke the renewal.
Yeah, I don't think this overrides the ability to revoke based on the circumstances.
That's all I want to hear. If you
Yeah,
don't
I
feel
don't think
that,
it does,
then we're in
but we're
two
gonna let
different
Nora
things.
make her young lawyer comment, and then we're gonna move on because it's really late and this debate that'll bring us down.
But I actually do have to say, I kind of agree with David, and I'm not sure that it's a must or a shall. I actually think that the problem is that it's the permit coming first rather than the establishment. So I think to get to David's problem, it should be any establishment shall seek a renewal on an annual basis, or may seek a renewal on an annual basis too. But I do see David's point, and I don't think it's a must or shall. I think it is a concern about the permit being the noun there, or being the subject there.
I can live with each food service establishment shall apply for a permit on an annual basis, or for a renewal on an annual basis.
I think Nora and David certainly convinced me that it's such permit may be renewed on an annual basis. It's the discretion of the planning and zoning director as to whether when somebody's reapplying, whether they get it or not, based on the site plan, if it's being changed, based on the prior conduct, things of that nature.
Yep. So why don't we change the sentence that requires them to apply for the permit, and then we all happy. I like it. Thank you, Nora.
Okay.
That's a good solution.
Yep.
Is that acceptable the way it is right now, Lisa, or do you want it somewhere else?
No, I think it's fine there. We just say that they have to apply on an annual basis.
No, but Brian, I don't think you made the change Lisa was proposing.
No, I don't think so
let's
either.
double check
No,
that.
I think you haven't. So we want to say that food establishments must apply on an annual basis.
Okay, so any food establishment here,
Same place. Oh,
same place?
No, wait,
Must
below.
first.
No, go back.
To keep it the way it was. Yeah, just that last sentence. See where it says such permit may be renewed on an annual basis? What we're
You
going to
want-
say there is that the food service establishment must apply
Or may apply.
or may
May
apply
apply.
for a renewal on an annual or for
No,
renewal.
that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Because that means they don't have to apply. I mean,
Oh,
to
must
get it.
apply.
no, why don't you just say permits are renewed on an annual basis?
Let's just do that. That's perfect. Permits are renewed on an annual basis. Are you cool with that, Nora?
I am. Thank you. Solves the problem.
Good. We're good. Thank you, Tom.
There you go.
I was going to make a joke, but I won't.
Yeah,
Please make
hang
a
in
joke.
there. It's Getting
No.
late.
No, we want it.
Arlene, make a joke.
I know. How many angels are in the head of the pin? Are you going in that direction? Because yeah,
Yes, but
I think
won't.
that's where you want to go with that. Yeah, we can talk about the word shall, must, and may.
That's right.
We apologize to all non-lawyers. How interesting was that for all of us? All right. So are there any other, the only other comment that I wanted to bring up and respond to was the chief did say that the police department did have some concern about food not being required to be served with alcohol. He and I had a long conversation about the fact that it's not something you can really regulate, right? You can order food, but you can't make people eat the food. And so he agreed that it was kind of hard to enforce situation, but he is concerned that we have a good mechanism for purposes of making sure that any complaints about outdoor dining do make it from the police to planning and zoning, so we can make the counts of like where we are, first offense, second offense, continuing offenses and things like that. So Jess made that commitment to the chief, and I think we're good there. So having heard all of the comments and fought for the angels on the top of the pins, are we ready to take a vote on the amended outdoor dining ordinance as we have discussed? Good, thumbs up. So I would like to ask that we have a motion to move the chapter 45 article 4 outdoor dining ordinance. Thank you, Tom. All in favor. I think Tom can't hear. Tom's so ready for bed. Great. It passes unanimously. Thank you, team. Thank you to DPW and Broderick and the chief, of course, to Jess and Steve for all of the hard work they did. Mr. Ireland for weighing in. This has been a team effort across the city. Thank you all. And now we really have to thank now we really have to thank Garrett and poor Kyle, who have waited fully an hour and a half to talk to us about their new business, which is to discuss and vote on chapter 98, section 43. I think it's going to be pretty quick. Thank you, Kyle and Garrett. I wish we didn't have to have you guys listen to the conversation about the word shall.
Lisa, we have to do the minutes.
Oh, the minutes. Oh, man, I know I'm running fast. Thank you.
Motion.
One more thing. Can we do the minutes after we let Garrett and Kyle go?
Motion, you do a motion to go out of order, yes.
Can we have a motion to go out of order because these poor gentlemen. Great, thank you, because I do have a couple changes to the minutes. I can't bear to make them wait another minute. Great, Garrett and Kyle, hit it.
No, good evening, and good evening, council members, and we'll try to make this quick. But I'm joined here tonight with Kyle Benjamin. He's our transportation data analyst. He'll be here as well. And Kyle, if you could put up the ordinance on the screen so that everyone could see it.
Yep, let me find it.
But essentially, so we're here before you tonight for ordinance number 9843, which is the blocking of intersections.
Wrong one, sorry.
And specifically to talk about subsection D. So the proposal before you includes the removal of one intersection and the addition of a second intersection to the list. And just to take a step back and to just provide a little bit of the framework and the larger context. Our ordinance is largely based off the Connecticut General Statutes section 14.1. And it's really just to prevent vehicles from blocking intersections and prevent the passage of other vehicles or pedestrians through those intersections. And there's two common types of occurrences. You'll see this at signalized intersections. We have one on East Avenue at the exit 16 on and off ramps. And then there's the second type of occurrence is when signalized intersections queue back into neighborhoods and block adjacent stop controlled streets or intersecting side roads. That's the second common treatment. But the ordinance requires that these intersections are marked differently. So there's a requirement that there is do not block the box signage at these locations, that there's pavement markings that reflect it, and also there's signage that includes subject to fine, and the actual fine for this violation is $100. But I wanted to jump now to the first intersection. So the first one is a removal, and it's for the intersection of Route 1 at Park and France Street. So just to give a little context, and I'll have Kyle put up too, we just put together a couple of side-by-side aerials so you can see the intersection. So the picture, if you could zoom in a little bit, Kyle. But the picture on the top of your screen was taken from 2017. So this intersection on the left, you'll see Route 1.
2018, Garrett.
Oh, yeah, 17, 18. So the intersection on the left, you have North Ave, France Street, and Park Street. It used to have this pavement marking treatment. And the reason why is if you look to the right side of the screen, you'll see the intersection of North Ave, East Avenue, and Westport Avenue. And it used to just have the eastbound approaches used to have one left turn lane and then one through lane. And what would really happen is there's such a great demand for through vehicles there that you can kind of start to see them stacking in that lane, but they would extend all the way back to the left side of the screen, and they would block essentially what is the intersection of North Ave, Park and France Street, and they provide congestion and gridlock at that intersection. So you can actually see from this image that was taken in 2018 that intersection was under construction. And if you scroll down, Kyle, And you can see that the intersection was improved at or around 2019, and there was an addition of a separate left turn lane, the provision of 2 through lanes. And at that time, that greatly improved the operations of that intersection and reduced the spillback into North Ave, France Street, and Park Street intersection. So it was no longer needed, and the state came through. They paved the roadway and they restriped the roadway. And as part of the Do Not Block the Box program on state roads, it's actually the responsibility of the municipality to install and maintain those pavement markings. So because there is no longer a need, the city never installed them. And we're actually currently upgrading North Park and France Street. We're upgrading the signals, and within that analysis and design, it was determined that it will not be needed moving into the future. So what we propose is just a cleanup of the language and the removal of that location from the list. But the second intersection is really the one that kind of brought us to revising this ordinance and here before you today. So, and Kyle will just put up another map of East Avenue. So this is really what kind of was the impetus for us to propose these changes for the ordinance. But essentially in the fall of 2021, we received a citizen request and an inquiry about how we could improve access to Olmsted Place and Knickerbocker Avenue. The reality is that intersection is just really close to the exit 16 ramps. And what happens most of the time is northbound traffic will block Olmsted Place. There's 2 travel lanes headed north on East Avenue at Olmsted Place. And there currently exists a sign today that says do not block the intersection. However, with 2 lanes of traffic, it's often blocked and it's often not seen. And there isn't the pavement markings that would indicate to someone that's entering the intersection, you know, really where they have space to be and where they do not have space to be and where they would potentially block access to or from the street. So we went before the traffic authority in November to present our proposal. We did field observations. We actually looked at drone videos of the intersection and determined that the do not block the box treatment would be the best treatment there to improve access to that roadway. At that time, the traffic authority asked us to hold a neighborhood meeting with the residents of Olmsted Place and Knickerbocker Avenue, which we subsequently did. We sent out a flyer to every resident. We walked the street, canvassed it to not only make them aware of the meeting, but also get their feedback for the general improvements. And what we found is people were largely supportive of the improvements. At the night of the neighborhood meeting, we received some additional feedback, which we brought to the traffic authority in January of 2022. And just some of that specific feedback was just related to, I just want to clarify, because this intersection was proposed to be included within the ordinance a long time ago. However, at that time, it was also proposed that some of the entering and exiting movements may be limited or restricted at Olmsted Place. And at the neighborhood meeting, we clarified that we would just, this proposal before you tonight is for simply to paint a do not block the box over those 2 northbound travel lanes on East Avenue and not to change any of the access. So in the future, residents will be able to take lefts or rights out of their street and enter similarly. So that was one of the things that changed from previous proposals to the current one that's before you tonight. Additionally, just for the council's knowledge, the way the ordinance is written and the way we were proposing to sign this intersection, again, just the 2 northbound travel lanes would be proposed to have subject to fine signage and do not block the intersection signage. So anyone that's entering or exiting the street would be exempt from being fined. And the spirit and the intention of this do not block the box installation here is not to punish residents or people trying to access their homes or adjacent businesses, but really just stop violators from that are traveling in the northbound direction. So that was one of the additional things we clarified. And then some of the final points is we would study this afterwards. We've already taken a lot of data before, so we would continue to study the implementation to just make sure of its efficacy. And this would likely be done in the spring of 2022, just pending your approvals. And at that time, we would also, once again, canvass the neighborhood to let them know and hand out some flyers and information about the proposed project and what it is and isn't, and what its impacts are. So we're before you tonight to, in summary, request the removal of one intersection and then the addition of this intersection. I'm happy
Great.
to answer any questions.
Any questions that we might have? So this is a very simple little tweak to the ordinance. What we'd like to do is vote on this to take that also to council. And Brian, it looks like you've got something to say,
Yes.
as well as David. Start
I
with
gotta-
Brian and then go to David.
Gotta figure out how to put my hand down now. There we go.
It goes to public hearing or council?
Public hearing.
I meant to say public.
So general statutes and Garrett and Kyle were very kind to get a lot of the information in advance. 14250 of the general statutes provides that Norwalk can designate intersections where vehicles cannot proceed into an intersection unless there is sufficient space on the opposite side to accommodate it without obstructing passage of other vehicles and pedestrians. 14250B subsection A, that's in that specific subsection. In order to accomplish this in compliance with the statutes, Norwalk must post a sign and mark the area, which is what Garrett has been going over. And that's in General Statutes 14250B subsection B. General Statute section 14309 does not permit this on any state highway or bridge by a municipality except by consent and written approval of the Office of the State Traffic Admission. And I know that we have another one of these do not blocks, literally 100 feet or 50 feet in front, but I just want to confirm that where we're seeking to install and mark is not state controlled or owned in any way. And simply put, that Norwalk is in control of this area and we don't need permission from the state.
Yeah, Brian, if you look on my shared screen, actually, perfect.
Thank you.
Slide. And I zoom in the green roads. If you want, I can scroll over to the legend here. Improved local road, sorry that it's turned. That is local roads that are owned by the state. This is also the same in the local DPW road classification, but you can see here's East Avenue.
Green are local roads owned by the city.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Green are local roads owned by the city. And that's the same in the DPW classification map. This is the CONDAT map. Here is East Avenue in green, and here's also Olmsted in green as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is a map taken directly from the state's offices.
Yep.
Great. And David, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Is any of this going to get impacted by the construction that's going to go on East Avenue when we start burying the lines and all the work that's going to be done there? Is there going to be any issues with doing this? Or are we going to have to repaint all of this again and everything else? Is my question.
No, that's a great question. So there is some advanced utility work that's currently under construction. So we would wait for that work to finish up in the spring, but the actual limits of the roadway widening project stop at Myrtle. So if there's any improvements in this area in the future, it would, and we hope would be most likely related to the state's improving the exit 16 interchange. Which is potentially a long way off, but.
Okay, and then what is the enforcement mechanism on these? Because I gotta be honest with you, I go through that intersection off the ramps there all the time, and there's everybody parked in that box. It's kind of crazy. So how are we at enforcing this? I mean, the rush hour times, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, that whole East Avenue area, you can have cars just parked in there and it's a mess. So I bring that up. This is going to add to that. I think I love the fact that the residents on Olmsted would be able to get in and out, but I'm concerned that we're going to paint lines on the ground and we're not going to get any bang for the buck, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'd be happy. So we would certainly coordinate with enforcement of this intersection. As far as the do not block the box, as we conveyed to the neighborhood, it's not the perfect be all end all, but there's research that shows that it does increase compliance of drivers that aren't blocking the box. So can't guarantee that every driver is not going to block the box. And also the way the ordinance is written, tractor trailers are exempt, larger trucks are exempt from that ordinance. So you will see that happening from time to time. But again, we see that their value, and this is an incremental improvement to make it better for residents to enter and exit the street. But it isn't the be all end all, and we would look certainly for improvements with the exit 16 and the intersection configuration and timing to hopefully ultimately not necessitate this improvement anymore.
Is there anything to be done with I mean, we just got earmarked for the grants for more adaptive signals. Is this an area that we're looking at adaptive signals in?
So yes, to the immediate south, so through the East Avenue, the roadway widening project, that is something that's planned. These intersections are something that the administration is really pushing for with some of the funding that's coming out of the federal government. So looking for the state to advance some of these projects, which would ultimately be the interstate exchange and ramp project.
Would we be?
There's no program. It's currently under very preliminary design at the state. I can tell you just from meetings with their offices, but there's no approved design for that location or funding yet, but we would be supportive of those improvements.
Well, yeah, with the grant money that's coming out of the state, it'd be nice to see East Avenue all the way up doing that adaptive work. But no, this is a great, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I can tell you as part of this, we actually, so we met in the field with the consulting firm that was hired by Condat to collect data and start to review some preliminary design plans for this location. And they were able to show us some of the drone footage they captured and of the entire area. So it is a project that is starting to move, but it's in the very early stages of conceptual design.
Nora, you had your hand raised. Are you satisfied with what you've heard, or do you have a question?
I just honestly wanted to say thank you both so much. I so appreciate your attention to the needs of the residents, the amount of time spent speaking with them. This is just the kind of thing that as a council member completely warms my heart, and just my huge applause for you as staff for really trying to solve this problem.
Thank you. We think this is an incremental improvement, and it will make it just a little bit better for residents in the interim.
Great. Any other comments from committee members about this? Questions, concerns? So
I just second exactly what Nora just said.
Do you want to bring a motion to take this
Sure.
public hearing? How about that? All right. So everybody in favor of taking this ordinance change to a public hearing next committee meeting? All in favor? I don't see everybody, but I assume it's unanimous. If you don't want this, speak up now. So that is it. I bet somebody else has a motion they want to make.
Minutes.
Wait, the
Oh,
minutes.
the minutes. Damn it. I keep her. Okay, Garrett and Kyle, you guys want to split because I do have a couple of things on minutes.
Thank you, council, so much, and thank you, Lisa, for putting us ahead of the minutes.
I'm really
Have a great
sorry
night,
that you guys had to wait so long.
No need to apologize. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
All right,
Have a good night, guys.
I too am really don't want to talk about minutes. I gave you my changes, Brian. Do I need to reread them again, or are we okay?
I got them.
All right. Anybody else with any changes in the minutes they'd like to make, or can I otherwise have a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
What, actually,
Motion
I hate to do this. What were your changes? Did you
You
send
really
them?
want to hear? I mean, the word there, I added the word.
I'm sure they're fine, but I just feel like, did I miss anything? Did I?
If you don't know, you don't know, Tom.
All right. Well, I know, I
So
don't
here's
know a
the-
lot of
The
things.
major change I was going to make was that Matt didn't lead the conversation, but Nick did on cannabis. That was the big change.
Okay, I'm sure they're fine. I just thought,
Yeah,
wanted to
and
know
I
if they
changed
were.
the word there. A
You
couple.
drop me off, that's fine.
I'll send you a copy if you really need it.
That's fine.
I know.
I vote for
I'm
it.
doing this for you. I know you want to go to bed, and I'm trying to move this along. So a motion to accept the minutes as amended. All in favor? I think I count everybody up. Now, how about a motion to adjourn?
Wait, Lisa, one second. I just want to
Oh.
make sure we have temporary ban on cannabis and outdoor dining going to common council, and we have 9843 subsection D going to a public hearing at the next meeting in March.
That's it. And the minutes
Thank
are
you.
accepted and.
Minutes are accepted. Thank you.
We are done. Thank you, everybody. It's been a super long day. I know it. We're all tired.
Good
Thank you
night,
very
everyone.
much.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
All right.
Good night. Thank you.